Hello there. I know I said that I would be doing my Talking Con episodes from the 31st, and then I got emails and people saying, no, that's simply unacceptable. So it looks like I'm starting off a little bit early. As it happens, this is not a full-blown episode. Our episode number 1 is next week. We're going to be doing a bunch of Stars of Comic-Con or Stars of SDCC episodes. We've got some great guests lined up, people who did very, very well, not only on the floor, but just generally around San Diego and Comic-Con. I think you're going to be really thrilled with what I've got lined up in terms of my guests. So that starts next week. This week, however, is an incidental episode. We drop these in every once in a while as special showcase episodes. We either do them midweek or sometimes, like we do here, we're doing it a little bit early on a Sunday. And the idea is we do a kind of spotlight on something which is interesting to me and interesting to my guests. As it happens, we've been reached out by one of those legends of comics, which we're going to talk to very shortly indeed. And yeah, I think this is going to be a cool episode. As always, jump in. Do let us know where you're watching from. Andrew English is saying hello from London. Hello, Andrew. How are you? If you are watching this, and we've got a couple of people who are tuning in, we can see on the numbers already. That means you're a subscriber, and that's what we need. We need more of those as we go into. As we go into season 10. Season 10. How did that work? We're getting some guests which I think you're going to be very happy with, which I got to manage to speak to at San Diego. So really looking forward to sharing more about that. But certainly for the next 2 weeks, we've got some great guests. Like I say, these the stars of SDCC. But all in all, I think you're up for a great season. And thank you very much indeed for everybody who asked if we could start things off a little bit earlier. And that's why we're doing this. Also, thanks for everybody who voted on the color scheme for this year's season. So thank you very much indeed for choosing exactly the same colors, just reversed. Thanks for that. So yeah, we've got the teal, and we've got the teal and the mustard. That's our brand colors. You'll be seeing these. Of course, if you see them out and about, if you see them on social media, spread the word. Let people know, because we want to try and really boost our numbers this time round, because I think as we head barrel towards SECC 2023, I think we've got a year's worth of rather cool stuff to share with you. One thing that hasn't changed is the opening titles. Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. My name is Leonard Sultana, and each and every Sunday we talk comics, con culture, and all the stuff and nonsense we get to enjoy at Comic-Cons. It's mostly a news and update show. We're going to be starting our first run of this season, which is season 10. Do not ask me to try and work out the math of how we've got 10 seasons when I've only been doing this for something like 7. But we're calling it 10. We're calling it 10 seasons. This is, if you're watching this for the first time, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you very much indeed. Like and subscribe, jump down below, hit the bell, do the nonsense. And of course, we'll show up in your notifications each and every Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. If you're watching on Facebook, spread the word. Let everyone know that we're doing the show. And yeah, if you're interested, and if you really want to jump in on the conversation, because this is very much your show, it's an open conversation, it's a round table, it's your show at the end of the day. Please do dive in on the comments. We've got people who are commenting already on the YouTube and on the Twitter. Thank you very much indeed for saying hello. Andrew English is saying hello. Hello from London. Aaron Neighbors, good friend of the show and a good friend in IRL as well. Hello from San Diego. We've got ourselves Toby is watching. Good morning, Leonard. Chuck Cook is watching. Good morning, everybody. Lots of our American friends jumping in as well. Andrew English, of course, is reminding us as well. The cons continue. MCM has just announced its latest updates for its October show. And we've got Andrew's next con, which is next weekend at TFN Nations, which is a Transformers show as well. Lots of cons. We're going to try and keep you updated with all the stuff and nonsense when it comes to those cons. But this is a show which was requested by a very special individual. And this is one of our incidental episodes. So if I do that, yay, got myself a little bit of news thing there. There you go. It kind of tells you it's season 10, incidental episode. The reason why I was really excited about doing this particular episode when the person emailed and got in contact with us is because there are a number of books which I consider kind of essential texts when it comes to the creation of comics. I mean, number one is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. If I can find my copy, I'll be damned. It's in this house somewhere. I think I put it somewhere safe because it's signed. So yeah, Scott McCloud. The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering, which is an Eisner-nominated text. Why this didn't win, I have no idea. Nate Pecos did an amazing job on this. If anything, because it gets into the nuts and bolts of comic book lettering, and it does it in a really concise way. Other books that I'd recommend as well, The British Invasion by Greg Carpenter. I'd also recommend Elsa Chaterier's Volume 2 as well, because she really gets into all the nuts and bolts of her particular process, especially when it comes to panel creation and all the bits and pieces like that. I am waiting on Tess Fowler's autobiography and book as well, because that's going to be a guide on how to do comics, I feel. So yeah, I'm waiting on that. We'll talk about that in a second. But we can add a new book to the roster. And it's this, Filth and Grammar. This is a book which is breaking open what I call the dark arts of comic creation, because people talk about art, and that's a skill that you can learn. It's something you can really get into as an artist, as a creator. Writing, again, there's lots of books and texts on the best techniques for doing that. Coloring, likewise. Editing comics is a different ballgame because it's juggling a whole bunch of plates and a whole kind of spinning a whole bunch of moving parts to get a book out in any kind of form that you feel is fit. This is the first of a selection of tomes as done by Shelly Bond. Shelly is a legendary comics editor, worked for Vertigo under Karen Berger, and is somebody who is very clued up and knows exactly what she's doing. Struggling to join our live feed because she can't get it working on her iPad. So listen, she's on it. She's on it. She's going to sort it out. I'm certain that I'm getting messages left. I'll listen. If I just keep looking down, it's because I'm working that out. However, Shelly wanted to come on and talk about that. She wanted to talk about another book that she's got in the pipeline as well. But as it happens, I do have somebody else that I can talk to as well. And I've been really looking forward to speaking to her. We've got Tess Fowler who's joining us. Hello there, Tess. How the devil are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm going to go full screen with you so we can see this. Go like that. Hey, I missed you.
I missed you too. You were so close.
I know. We swang into LA twice, once on the inbound and one on the out, and both times we weren't close enough to kind of meet up. But it was a shame that we
How was LAX? Was it like super crowded?
Hell. It's hell. Of course, it's hell. It's LAX. But then again, I am absolutely of the opinion that every airport on the planet is designed to suck the life and it's designed to absolutely kill you from the inside and just tear you apart and leave you a bloody mess on the floor. It's all airports are hell. So
Oh,
yeah,
man.
that's regardless. But LAX
No,
is
so okay. So during San Diego, like during that weekend, my little cousin, who I had not seen in like a dozen years, who's now like an international supermodel, showed up at LAX and got stranded. Like her plane back home wasn't for a couple days, and her ride and her place to stay fell through. So she hits me up on Instagram, and I was like, girl, I was like, we'll be there. Don't worry about it. So me and Chris jumped out of bed. This was like 11 something at night. Jumped out of bed, headed down to LAX, grabbed her. Her little brother actually lives down south now in Southern California. So they hadn't seen each other in like 4 years. So called him up, and, because I'd seen him. And I said, hey, your sister's here. Got them hooked up. By the next morning, I had them passes into San Diego Comic-Con, and we were getting them on the train. So it was the wildest thing. Now, this boy has not been to Comic-Con since he was like 8 years old. She had never been. They literally had no clue what they were walking into. I said, all right, you're going to go to this gate, and you're going to ask for this person. He's going to get you in. I want you to see as much of the floor as you can. They had no idea, no clue. It was so hilarious. And then they had no ride back. Like the train tickets were messed up. So we were like, we will come get you.
You were a guardian angel. I saw you sent me messages. You were a guardian angel.
My babies were lit when we found them. Like they wandered out of Comic-Con into the nightlife, and just they're young, or mid-20s. They partied together. They met like Elvira and all kinds of people. We found them finally coming, swerving and careening into each other, laughing. They were so drunk on San Diego Comic-Con. It was hilarious. So we gathered them up and... No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, as somebody who's been to San Diego Comic-Con, I've been a couple of times, once or twice. You've been once or twice.
Yes.
You know how intense that show can be, and for first timers, it's great to kind of see.
They were so just happy, drunk on it, and they were telling us, "You wouldn't believe we met so many people. Everyone was so nice." And I was trying to explain to them, like, "Yeah, this is like the first official year back, so everyone hasn't seen each other in a while." And they were like, "Can you come next year? Can we all go together?" I was like, yes, I cannot say no to that. Yes, I will bring you next year. So they want to do the full 5 days. They're planning costumes. Chris is going to build them armor. Like they have the bug. It was amazing. So, but I didn't get to see you. I felt so bad.
Well, I mean, like I say, we miss each other in LA. We miss each other when you swang by to kind of drop them off. But I mean, safe to say, I was busy. I mean, the way I've been describing it to people this time round, it was a case of I saw so much. I did so much. I did 3 panels. I attended the whole H palaver. I did all of this. I saw as many people as I could. I had conversations with Kevin Eastman and Scott Snyder and Tom King and and Jock and blah, 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 and just rattling them all off. And I still scratch the surface. There's so much stuff that I didn't do. It's just ridiculous. But at the end of the day, people still had a lot of anxiety about going. It was still a show that people were nervous about. And I know that that's something that part of the reason why you didn't go. Do you feel that you missed it? I mean, that's the thing. There's so much stuff that barrels out of social media. You're kind of getting a virtual taste of it anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing for the past few years is, Chris and I met at Comic-Con, the Heavy Metal magazine booth. He was dressed as Boba Fett, like the legendary story. So that was always we consider that our anniversary because we officially got together like just a couple months later. So that's our official anniversary. And we always regretted not being able to go. So during the pandemic, it was like, oh my gosh, we're missing out. I wish it was happening. But then when we went to go pick up the kids, it was so weird. All the usual faces weren't there. And as we looked around, it was almost like stranger in a strange land. So like we missed it until we got there. And then it was like, oh wow, with the big video screens inside and so much, like a lot had been changed, it felt odd. So I'm hoping if we can, like I told you before, our plan was to like make costumes with full face masks and no one can touch us.
I think
That's
that will
what
be
we're doing next year.
that will be absolutely right.
Yeah.
So as it happens, someone solved some technical issues, and
Yay!
she's joining us. We have Shelly Bond joining us. Shelly, how the devil are you?
Hi.
Oh, can we hear you? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Is she sorting her microphone out?
Oh
no. Oh, no, she's muted now. I think it's your mic. Oh no. Listen, a quiet Shelly Bond is an alien concept to me. I don't understand.
The whirlwind has not hit us yet.
Yeah, it does not compute. Let me hang on a second. No, can't hear you, Shelly. It might be a microphone. I mean, what are you on your laptop? Are you on a PC? How are you? What are we on?
I don't even know if she can hear us.
Can you hear us? Oh, okay. There you go.
Anyway,
that was Shelly Bond, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. That was cool.
I can tell you all about Shelly. I can
sure
give you all the 411.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. We've got somebody else as well who can say his fair share as well. Love to Tess and Shelly and Leonard from Will Potter. Hello, Will. How the devil are you? I've had a peek at Fast Times. It's incredible work. Love your comic creator portraits. So there you go.
Oh,
that's rather cool.
Oh.
Yeah, Toby, Technical Gremlins, Run Amok. Yeah, we have one or two issues I once more. She'll get it sorted.
She literally has demons on her roof, though. Like, no joke. Where she lives in this old-timey, old Hollywood house, like bungalow house. And when you go, there are literal, like, I think it's raccoons, but it sounds like demons just tap dancing on her roof. It's the worst. And like, so if you go and sit in her living room, it's just as over the top, and it's like, oh god. So we always tease her she has gremlins.
Well, okay, let's talk about your relationship to. Well, I mean, to be honest, let's actually go a little bit further back, considering that there may be some people who are watching this who don't know who people are. So yeah, let's talk about yourself. Hang on, let me say. Let's just see if we got one more try with Shelly.
I think this is working now.
Woo!
Oh my god, I'm mortified.
Hi, Shelly.
Hey, you.
Hey guys. Okay, I'm gonna blame it on this guy.
I've got Tetley tea. I've got nothing to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe it would have been better off if I didn't show up. If you're drinking Tetley tea,
PG's all right. It does the job.
Come on,
it does the job.
It's the only tea.
Hey.
Yorkshire tea is the only tea.
I've got Yorkshire right here, but that's only because PG Tips ran out.
All right, you can stay in the chat. Leonard, please leave the room.
Fine. Right, I'm going to do the intro again because you missed it. Because I do want to talk about
burn.
No. It's because there's several books, and I'm not going to go through all of them again. Not all of them, but I was saying that I feel there are some essential texts when it comes to comic creating. Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud. My signed copy is in this house somewhere. Be damned if I know where it is. British Invasion by Greg Carpenter, for just the whole history of Gaiman, Morrison, Moore.
I need that one. I need that one.
Me too. I'd like that one.
Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering.
Oh my god, essential for everyone on Earth, not just people into comics.
It's just because it's about craft. That's the thing. I mean, there are some books out there which just kind of gloss over things. I mean, he just goes, "Oh no, this is how you're going to do it. This is how you're going to do it right. Now, shut the fuck up and listen." That's the book, and it just does.
Is.
And then there's this.
Aww.
That's
I'm gonna hide.
That was my intro.
I'm gonna hide again.
Oh, look at this. So we are going to be talking about Filth and Grammar, and we're also going to be talking about a new project as well. Very quickly for those people who I'm going to enjoy this bit. If you say, for example, met somebody at a dinner party and they didn't know comics too well and they wanted to know who you are, Shelly, introduce yourself as though it's to a complete stranger at a dinner party.
God, okay, I would just be like, "Hi, I eat comics," and then I would hide under the table because I'm not a social person.
I eat comics. I'm done with that. Okay, that's cool. Tess, same question. If you're introducing yourself to somebody at a dinner party, how would you introduce yourself? A little bit of pocket history and all that kind of thing.
I am the most well-known, least known artist in comics. I have a notoriously big mouth, which my reputation tends to precede me. I've done some fairly interesting off-the-wall projects. Most known for Rat Queens, Kid Lobotomy, and Dungeons and Dragons. And you can find me on Twitter.
There we go. That's how you would introduce yourself. I mean, I like Shelly's. It's nice and it's to the point.
It's lean and mean. I'm an editor.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's part of it's one of the reasons why I'm really glad that you reached out about this, because I think my desire to do comic book editing panels at Comic Cons is well known at this point. I have been wanting to see somebody talk about that element of comics creation, because I don't think even there are many people, or that there's enough people in comics making comics that appreciate a good editor and what an editor does and how they influence how a book eventually gets out. If we start with Filth and Grammar, then Shelly, if you could just talk about the how that project came about, because I got my copy through Kickstarter. I supported.
Thank you.
I support Shelly's Kickstarters a lot. So there we go. That's me just throwing me money around. Why Filth and Grammar? Why did you feel it was an important book to write or get out there?
Well, to be honest, I wanted to plant my flag. You know, I've been in the industry over 30 years, and comics is going through a pretty bad time. And we can go into that later. But, you know, I was looking around at books on the craft, and except for the ones you mentioned, there are such a small handful. And let's be honest, many of those books were made in the 90s or maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There hasn't been anything recent. And also, there hasn't been anything written from an editor's point of view, much less a female editor. Again, we can go into that later, but I wanted to create the kind of handbook that I wish I had in the 90s when I was coming up in comics, because you learn how to edit comics on the job. I mean, that's just it. You know, in the 90s, I used to say that the job of the comic book editor was the greatest job that no one knows about. And I like to keep it that way. It was very specialized. And I really felt that it's 2022 or 2021 when I put this together, and it was about time an editor stepped up and created a handbook from this point of view, because I still think the editor gets a bad rap. People like to either say the editor's invisible, which I absolutely hate. So Leonard, if we're in a room together, do not say that to my face.
Yeah, it would never happen.
Okay. But, you know, honestly, it's hard to articulate in words and on paper exactly what an editor does. So my number one job was to demystify what the comic book editor does from day to day. And it's a hell of a lot, as you know, because you've probably read the book a few times.
Once or twice.
And it's case by case. So the best comic book editors ask the right questions, and they customize their skills based on the project.
That makes sense. Like I say, when it comes to the creators that also, I mean, I see online, and when you see the discussion about the creative process of putting a comic out, the editor always seems to get a short thrift,
or nothing,
or nothing at
Yeah.
all. Whenever you see a review of a comic on the Convention Collective, which I run, I insist that you have the complete creative team, and that includes editorial, because, like you say, it's all about. Thank you. Because at the end of the day, they set the tone, they set the project parameters, they make sure the damn thing even gets made.
Well, that's
if you have a good one.
Yes. They get it finished. They
Big
get the job done.
distinction. Giant distinction is what some editors really, they're not there. They're not present. The editor is there to protect you, to guide you, to teach you if they have that, you know, enough experience. And the thing that I love, which has made me a champion of this project from day one years ago, Shelly is the type of editor, if you'll bear with me, Shelly. Shelly's the type of editor who, like, if this was the 70s and she was in the music industry, she would have been the one to go into the most lowbrow club to find the secret talent that, like, she loves that. She feeds off of it, and she has an instinct for it. So if you look back through her history of, like, the creators that she has championed, the one, you know, it's not always the front runner. A lot of times it's the underdog, and she's the one in the back going, listen to this band rocks, you don't understand music. Like, she's that type of editor, and that's why these projects that she's putting out on Kickstarter are so fun to me, because it's this little window into the heart and soul of someone who is kind of a dying breed. There's so few people like Shelly who just believe in comics for the sake of the art, the art form, and she treats editing as a different kind of art form. And sometimes she can't always articulate it because she's worked so long behind the scenes. She can't always. She's not a fan of selling herself, so that's why I'm doing it for her.
Wow.
But that's what's interesting. So if you can really get her talking at any point at a convention or whatever, and really get her talking about the heart of comics, why she got into it, that is when she is at her most fascinating, because you can tell she's in love with the medium.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry for taking over there.
No. That was a hell of a tribute, and well deserved. I think.
Wait, I have to say one thing. The check is in the mail, Tess.
When it comes to editing, I think a lot of people seem to think that it's a element of the chain which would then be passed down from a higher power, that they are then brought into the process to guide and manage the project to final completion. Where do you see yourself in the chain, Shelly, or where do you see a good editor in the chain? Are they right there at the very beginning, or are they someone that folds into the creative team kind of further down the pipe, if you know what I mean?
Well, in the books that I work on, the editor is master control, full stop. So the editor is present at every stage, and often at the beginning of the project. So for things that I work on, I've been known to be pretty picky. And Tess, you can chime in and giggle if you want. But honestly, I like to assemble my own teams. It's very hard for me to be brought onto a project because 9 times out of 10, I think that when a writer and an artist decide to collaborate, if they're serious, perhaps they're not really meant to work on paper together. And what I mean by that is it's hard to tell a friend that line of copy is arch. And it's hard to tell a friend you forgot a finger on that hand. So an editor is the perfect middle person, the negotiator. And I think that that is one of the key functions that we actually have on a project especially if it's with an indie team, because so often it's twice as much pressure to know that the person you're working with isn't either working up to their full potential, or maybe shouldn't even be drawing or writing. Maybe, let's be straight, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there right now that shouldn't be published yet. And I say that with love. And I think, not to sound snobbish, but I think what's happened in the industry, which is tragic, is that, you can look back and, I implore the Guardian or the New York Times to do an assessment of editors in comics from the 90s to the present day. Because what you will see is in the 90s, there was this glittering landscape, and women in particular had a bright future, because we had Jeanette Kahn, who was the trailblazer of comics for women, full stop. We had Karen Berger, who was right there with her. And I was lucky. My two bosses in comics were Karen and Diana Schutz, because I did start out in indie comics, and Diana really taught me the ropes, hardcore English grammar, syntax. And she was a tough boss, but she was fair, because she would not let anything go. Talk about the ultimate pedant. That's Diana. But when you go through the 90s and you look at the editors that sort of came up around me at that age, we did our best to bring in more women, both in editorial and also in the creative side, from letterers, colorists, and artists. In the 2000s, things started to go into decline. And I'm not 100% sure it's whether the megacorp came in and started chomping and, eating bits off the top of companies and downsizing from the top down, not even looking at names, but looking at salaries, throwing them out the window, or if people actually just didn't care about the craft. And I can assure you that the reason that Vertigo books look like they did and resonate like they do on paper and in different media is because we cared about every aspect.
I've got something to jump in on that then, because I've been thinking about this. In the 90s and in the early 2000s, when you had the rise of the superstar artist and superstar writer, when they got more power, yes, we're talking about Image Comics here, when that bunch came together and created Image Comics, which for a creator's rights perspective was trailblazing and necessary. Yeah. But there were so many egos playing in that particular sandbox that editorial got completely left behind. It's almost like they just rode ramshod over the creative process and editorial as part of it. Does that make any? Does that?
Right? Absolutely. Look, and to be fair, there are some rock star teams that just work. Look at Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and I'm not sure if they have an editor on their books, but I've worked with both of them, and not to take too much credit, but I introduced them on Scene of the Crime. So to say they were a rock star team from the beginning, well, I was there. They were, and they are. So, you have people like that, but, they are few and far between. And look, when I was working on Filth and Grammar, I had 2 editors. So believe me when I tell you, most of us need editors. And without a doubt, everyone needs a proofreader. And there's a huge difference between those 2 roles. And I think, just to comment on something you said much earlier, I think today most people assume that editors are facilitators. They collect your work, they log it in, they chase up your invoice, and they beg the accounting department to pay you. Now, those are important parts of the editor's job, but that doesn't even scratch the surface. So that's why I put together Filth and Grammar. I wanted to do a comprehensive guide from idea and even a bad idea, because a lot of ideas are derivative. And, appropriation is a great thing, but sometimes you need someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, fairy tale characters in a modern setting, well, that's been done before. How can you make it wholly your own? And we all know that Bill Willingham knew what he was doing when he pitched that to me. But if I can count the number of fables-like pitches that have been handed to me, you know, if I had a nickel for every one of them, Leonard, we'd both be in Aruba.
You wouldn't need Kickstarter, that's for sure.
I would not, and we'd be having this conversation in Aruba.
So this book is like having Shelly in your studio, but not the same noise level.
No, yeah. Leonard wouldn't want that because I would bring the wrong tea and we'd have a fight.
You would bring a selection of teas, I would bring a selection of teas, and then we'd start blending. And that's when the magic happens. That's when the magic happens.
Not with tea. Not with comics, yes. With tea and with music, no.
Oh, we're not even going to go there.
No, we're not going to go there.
Oh, God.
Because I've gotten into trouble with Shelly before about this.
Yeah.
We're not, leave that one alone. I mean, the comment came in from Toby, and I'm going to show it. I did put it up earlier. I don't know if you saw it, Shelly. The comment is editor equals project manager. And I guarantee that doesn't barely scratch the surface.
No.
Doesn't scratch. This is the thing. This is where I think people need more info about what a good editor is. Agreed.
Yes. And thanks for the question. And honestly, project manager is one very, very tiny aspect of what a comic book editor does. Something that's overlooked, and I know this is a fact because I still go to my local comic book shop, which is Earth 2. Love those guys and gals. I go to the comic book store every couple of months just to flip through comics. And I can assure you that the craft is not being taught. And the answer, and the reason why, is because I'm usually not compelled to open up a book because I can't read the logo. I'm usually not compelled to open up the book because the covers don't say anything to me. And when you look at a comic book cover, you should be compelled to open it up and then read it as you're walking to the register when you're in a comic book store. And I know the craft is not taught because when you open up the comic, there's word balloons flying into your face. The art is very tiny, and it's impossible to understand how to go left to right, top to bottom. So I say that with love to the industry, but I also say do better. And I really hope that people at companies that matter, and by that I mean any company that's publishing and any self-publisher, get your act together. Start taking time to look into the craft, whether that's understanding comics, Eisner's sequential art books, some of the books you mentioned, Leonard, which I'm going to have to pick up. But there's very little on the craft. There's Linda Barry's Making Comics. Please, I implore you, assistant editors, if your editor isn't teaching you anything, be better than that. Start doing some work on your own and step it up, because we need to pay it forward for the next generation. So we have to do better.
Fair enough. I'm going to come back to a term you just used because I think that needs clarifying for some people. We'll let you have a think about editor and assistant editor and what that actually means. But for Tess, we'll bring you in because it's been a while since you've talked. So let's talk about when it comes to editors then, and the editors that you work with and what you feel is a good editor. As an artist, obviously you are being encouraged to do your best work, but then there may be that moment where you just need that freedom where you can just create in your own space. How far how much micromanaging do you feel an editor needs to employ for you to get your best work out?
Well, that depends on the project. It largely depends on the project. Like when I first started, I had no guidance. I was thrown to the wolves, and it was actually my colorist who taught me more than anyone else. Tamara Bonvillain, like on my first real giant project, she was my colorist. She made me look good. I could ask her about deadlines, all of that. She was like kind of my protector and guide. It really wasn't until Shelly that I understood what an editor could do. And Shelly, did you cover your face because you're embarrassed? I can't tell because you're tiny.
Not embarrassed at all. Not embarrassed at all.
So when Shelly and I first, I'm going to like switch over to Shelly. when Shelly and I first started working together, it was at a point when both of us were kind of in the media for various and sundry reasons. And we got together. What was that?
To say the least.
To say the least, exactly. So we started working on this particular project back in like, I think it was 2016. And we would meet at Porto's in Burbank and would talk about it. And I was excited because this was the first editor or even really longtime, veteran of comics who was still excited about the craft in a lot of the same ways I was. So now when people say, what do you believe makes a good editor? I refer back to Shelly and I say passion, whatever, quibbles, quabbles you have with your editor, so long as that passion is still there, you still want to fight. You still want to keep going. Yes, let's push through this. Let's make this happen. That to me is essential because I've had editors who they're not even there. It's like you don't even have one, so I would rather have that super passionate, back and forth about the craft and the project and what it should be, what it shouldn't be. I would rather have that.
I think it's worth noting, Leonard, if I may,
sure,
that Filth and Grammar really began as a project that Tess and I were doing together. And I'll try to keep it really brief, but 2016, Tess and I didn't know each other at all. We sort of met online because of very different but equally unfortunate incidents happened to us.
Yeah.
You could throw unethical, you could throw any other adjective that you wanted to the mix. But what happened was I was familiar with Tess's art just from seeing it around, I think from Rat Queens probably. But I noticed she was selling art and I knew about her story and I wanted to buy some art from her because, I wanted to help her as a fellow woman in comics who I thought was wrongly treated by comics in general. So that's where it started. So I bought 2 pieces of art and we just started a dialogue. And I spent a good 6 months in my local library, just free writing. And if I'm honest, I did a lot of reading comics while I was in the library too, because the Buena Vista Library out in LA has a tremendous comic book section and graphic novels. So I did a lot of writing. I caught up on reading, but most of all, I wanted to start working on a graphic memoir. So Filth and Grammar was always going to be a graphic memoir about my life in comics. However, as situations happen sometimes out of the blue, Chris Ryle had offered me a great opportunity to spearhead my own imprint. And so Black Crown kind of got in the way of Filth and Grammar. Although Tess, to her credit, did a large body of work for Filth and Grammar, and you've only seen a little of it in the actual Filth and Grammar book. And I'll tell you why. So basically, when Filth and Grammar eventually came out, I had to add a subtitle because I knew I wanted to leave a positive statement on the industry with a book in the craft before I got into more of the nitty gritty. So that's why Filth and Grammar has the subtitle, The Comic Book Editor's Secret Handbook.
I did kind of miss most of that. Because
that's
technical
okay.
difficulties.
It's okay. As long as the audience got it, it's okay.
Are you okay?
No, my internet's just kicked out completely, and I have no idea why. I'm now doing this on my, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm doing it on my phone. I'm still here. I'm okay.
And I'm doing it on my phone too. I mean, part of my problem was technical issues with my iPad. Tess should just be doing this solo. Tess, you should be doing a one-woman show today, I think. You're the only person who hasn't been inflicted by the evil technical gods. But long story short, Tess actually not only illustrated some amazing turnaround sheets capturing me in the early 90s in all my platform glory. She also illustrated a few of my favorite short comics, including my very first UCAT convention, which was the amazing British convention in London. Leonard, you might be too young to remember that. Tell me if you've been to a UCAC.
I have not been to UCAC. Mostly, it's not so much being too young, but when UCAC was kicking in, I had fallen out of comics. I did.
Shame on you.
No, there
Shame on you.
There was a tweet that went around. There's a meme going around at the moment. You know you're 30 when such and such, and the tweet I put out was, you know you're 30 when you've fallen out of love in comics twice, and now you're spending your entire waking time rebuilding your old collection from the 90s.
That's a good one.
And that's where I was. In the 90s when UCAC was happening, I discovered cider and boobs. Yeah. And I was dedicating a lot of my time to both.
Basically, real quick, what Shelly was describing was when she and I first, connected, it was over her passion for wanting to do a graphic memoir, which is, the boat I'm in right now, something I've always wanted to do, didn't quite understand it. So, of course, like spiritually, I was just like, yes, what was your time in comics like? So she was telling me all of these, banana stories, and she was like, well, yeah, but I'm only writing about, this fraction of them. And I was like, no, please, we must have the behind the scenes E True Hollywood story. So it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, passionate meetups about like, tell me more, tell me about this. How'd you meet this person? Because she was having me draw, she described that. I swear I just heard mariachis. I did a turnaround of her in the 90s because she was classic main character attributes. It was such a look in the 90s for her, which I didn't understand also, because we've talked about how I grew up in kind of a cult-like environment, didn't really understand music. Shelly was the opposite. Shelly was all the way the other end of the spectrum. She was, living this exciting New York life. And there's all these hot spots around New York, which she likes to talk about, which are, you can kind of see that in the book. But at the time, it was very personal. It was intensely personal. And I got to illustrate a couple shorts where I got to draw the greats, like the 90s greats. I was born in 81. I was a fetus while all of this awesome stuff was going on. So as a woman in comics, oops. You okay?
So I'm fine. Go on, keep going.
Okay, good. As a young woman in comics, it was this really exciting thing to hear about this other life that I just really didn't even know about. I didn't read Sandman until I was like 19, and I can't say I fully understood it at the time. I was a zygote. So what I love about this project is how much of Shelly is in it. Not only is it a wonderful, she's putting a loving message into the world about editing, about so even an independent artist or creator can edit their own stuff and have a little bit of that Shelly magic. But I love the personal aspects of it so much because I got to be there from the beginning. I got to see it, start to be birthed. So sorry, I ramble. I apologize.
How revealing would you say you have been, Shelly? Or how much have you kept back, as it were?
Well, okay, first of all, I think just to be clear, the difference between Filth and Grammar and Fast Times, which is the book that's kickstarting now, it's pretty simple if I describe it to you like this. Filth and Grammar is 80% how to make comics from an editor's point of view, and 20% a day in the life of the editorial ingenue. So Fast Times is the opposite ratio. So basically, Filth and Grammar was 300 pages. I had to edit it down to 168, which was painful. So Fast Times is pretty much lots of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor and lots of stuff that was too personal to include in a handbook on a step-by-step guide to making comics. So Fast Times is basically, it starts in 88 when I first get into comics, and it runs through the 90s, and it goes a little bit over into 2002 for two reasons. First of all, the 90s were chaotic. They were amazing. In addition to the cultural precipice of having the birth of Image Comics in 92, the death of Superman in 93, the onslaught, the British invasion of Vertigo. There were so many things happening in New York City at that time. There was an urban renewal. So when I first took an apartment on 8th Avenue and 53rd Street in 1992, it was Hell's Kitchen. And it wasn't exactly a pretty place to live. It was safe-ish, and I can assure you that when I went with my mom to take the cheapest apartment, that was a 6-block radius from DC Comics, if my father was with us, I wouldn't have been allowed to live there, even though it wasn't a nice part of town. So what I also try to cover in Fast Times is New York sort of pushing through sort of the decadence and decay, and sort of the rebirth and the renaissance of clubs and shops. And for me, at least, on weekends, everything was about St. Mark's Place. I mean, it was just this magical high street for me. So Tess was saying how I lived such a glamorous life in the 90s. Well, I guess if you consider working from 9 in the morning until 10 at night, every night on comics, yeah. I mean, it was glamorous to me. I put in the extra time because I wanted to. However, the weekends were really all about me, from taking a dance class at Broadway Dance, which was an incredible place just to learn any kind of dance. I took tap. But then weekends on St. Mark's Place, I would have this, like, I call it a music and sartorial crawl from Midtown to downtown. And then I would get to St. Mark's Place and I'd go to the same shops. I'd flip through records at Sounds for hours. I'd go to Trash and Vaudeville and go through their sale section. I could barely afford anything, but I would go and I would hope maybe I'd stumble on something I could afford. And I'd end up at St. Mark's Place at midnight, because there was nothing cooler than to be in New York City at midnight on a Saturday night, looking for artists and writers who could help me change the world, one panel at a time. I'm quoting myself, but it's true. It's
right
true.
There. You hear that? How do you not absolutely madly fall in love with that kind of attitude about comics? Like, that is the part of Shelly that I want kids to get to know, because right now, with the way the world is, this apocalypse, the world is on fire. There are young creators who are looking to all of us to set an example. And that right there is an example that is missing in the landscape. That's right there is what I love about Shelly.
Well, and back at you, Tess, because people need someone like you to encourage and empower them. Because comics is a dumpster fire right now. Leonard, would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with. Let me see how I can put this. It's a double-edged coin. It's a double-sided coin. I think one side of the coin is doing well. I think young comics is starting to develop nicely. Young readers are starting to develop nicely. I think there's a very sharp control on some of the books, and I think actually the big two and the big five are actually doing a half decent job of controlling it all, especially in the way that it's done in the shadow of pandemic. I do think the other side, the ugly side of the comics, is making way too much noise and dragging the whole thing down.
Interesting. And you're the only person of the trio here who's been to San Diego Comic-Con. So, I can respect your positivity here. I attended CouchCon, and I did appreciate all of your coverage. So thank you, Leonard. And I like your positive, half full, half empty approach, right?
This is what Tetley Tea does.
No, thank you. No, thank you. But, fair enough. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't think it was time to.
Oh, I definitely think there's space for it to be shaken up, and I definitely think there's space for it to be educated better. because right now we're kind of heading a little bit towards when I talk about that tight control and the what I feel the big industry is doing, I think they're heading towards a little bit of a cul-de-sac, and they're going into a little bit of a closed loop, because they really work well with closed loops. If it seems to work, let's just do that for a bit, and let's just circle instead of breaking through and doing something new.
Yeah.
I mean, but then again, like I say, that there's loud voices. I mean, when we talk about San Diego Comic-Con, you talk about the double sides of it. You've got the likes of Mark Brooks going out there, doing what he needs to do and doing his work as an artist. And then you've got some bellend from Comicsgate deciding that they want to harass him. That's your double sides. That's the two sides of it. But then again,
let me address that. Wait. Let me address that real quick. Let me put the other spin on that. Okay.
Go on.
So as someone who was absolutely notoriously harassed by these people who, you know, even while I was in chemo, people still don't know everything they did to me while I was in chemotherapy for breast cancer. They're absolute horrors. But comics and the comic book industry and the comic book community, so long as we have people like Shelly, people like me, people like you, Leonard, they won't win. They will never win. They will never be able to drag this back into the dark ages, because the only thing they're going to do by, you know, attacking is they're making the independents stronger. They're making those of us who aren't built that way, they're making us fight harder, which means the kiddos like mine who you know, I sent to Comic-Con for the first time this year, they are the new blood, and they are going to be okay. There are young creators right now. Shelly, you know, Ollie, Zoe Thorogood. There's children, babies who are coming in who are so absolutely in love with the medium and the craft that they want to break barriers. And those kids are what got me through my treatments and everything, because I thought, oh my God, am I never going to see the comics industry again? Am I never going to see, you know, Leonard and all these people I love again? All I kept thinking was the kids are all right. The new blood is going to do it. And some of us have been loud enough. They got the message. Right. These kids know, and they're going to fight it out. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, and I think what Tess said is true. And also, you know, if I may, I think that a lot of editors are lazy. You know, you constantly see people hiring the same people they've worked with for years, you know, not just people of my generation, but I think people tend to get complacent. And Leonard, you're right in the sense that there are so many people coming up in comics right now from all around the world. And I have to say that Andy Oliver at Broken Frontier and Lucy Sullivan were two people over the past 4 years who introduced me to so many tremendous British talents and other European talents. I mean, I've met people from South Africa and Greece and Copenhagen. I mean, around the world, there are talented people, and we will find each other. But the key is for editors to look farther afield than what's in front of their face. And I wince when I say this, but it doesn't mean you have to jump on a plane. Come on, people. Start digging and start talking to people. And most important, continue reading comics. Continue going to the stores. Continue getting comics online, however you get your comics. Just continue reading and look at other artistic mediums too. Sure.
No, absolutely. To quickly, let's return a little bit to the books themselves when it comes to Fast Times, and also how it applies and it tells your story of that period in your editorial, and when it comes to you doing editorial in New York. I want to dial it back to something you were saying earlier about you moving to New York and having those experiences. How do you feel that living in New York and having that New York experience changed your editorial style? Did it change the metabolism faster? Was it a case of being a little bit more experimental? How did it change your own style, you feel, for the better and for the worse?
Well, I think it just made me more propulsive or frenetic. I mean, I was always interested in comics and music and how they intersected. I should say since college. You know, I've said many times how I got into comics in my senior year of college from a screenwriting class. So I wasn't a big fan or reader. I wasn't a reader of much of anything as a kid. But I got really into filmmaking and experimental video art in college. And of course, I was a DJ, which I know you share a love of that, Leonard. We're both DJs at heart. So, you know, I will say that I spent a semester in London. So I think that affected everything. You know, I kind of just wanted to move to London once I graduated from college and just be a filmmaker, you know, until I discovered comics. And then I realized that everything I learned in college about film, video, and audio production could be applied to editing comics. And that's when my life really began. That's when I got excited about bringing in my love for the French New Wave or indie film and music into the comics. So working in New York, to answer your question, I think it just fueled the passion I already had. I'm not like from a rural area. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is a small city outside of Philadelphia. So I lived for a few years in Philadelphia, right in Center City, when I worked at Comico. Moving to New York was a jump, but it was, I guess, maybe more of a stag leap rather than a tremendous jump. And I love the idea of being anonymous in a big city. You know, I'm not a social person. I'm a geek, just like everyone else in this conversation. I'm shy, and I kind of prefer my own space. So editing comics in New York was about me going into the office every day and pouring my heart and soul into every book I worked on. And you'll see that in Fast Times. You'll see what I did from hanging on the telephone with Grant Morrison. The irony of that was I'm still such a goody-goody. Never did drugs. I smoked cigarettes. That was my greatest vice. Quit 18 years ago, but that was it. A couple, drinks now and then. But I was working with people like Grant, and I was working with Neil Gaiman. So, I have a couple of one-pagers called Hanging on the Telephone, with an ode to Blondie, of course. The other aspects of the pace of New York, it was like I was dating the city. I didn't have time for a serious relationship in those early days. So I didn't mind. I was getting to know New York City. I had visited many times. The first time I went to New York was in 1978. My aunt took my sister and I to see, I think it was Annie on Broadway. I walked by Fiorucci's window, and anyone who doesn't know, Fiorucci was the new wave destination for clothes and culture. I looked in the window and I saw a mannequin with white hair, and I knew at that moment I wanted to grow up, have white hair, and be new wave. So that was a big part of changing my life. And that's living in New York. Even though I was there in the 90s, I had read about New York in the 80s. I was too young to experience it because I was still in high school, but everything that I touched, every gallery show I went to, I hung out at ICP, which is the International Center of Photography. Anyone I discovered during those days somehow came back into my comics that I edited, whether it was just giving an art director a page from a magazine. And Leonard, you'll be happy to know that also included the magazines that I would scrape my funds together to buy. The British magazines of the 90s and the British music of the 90s really fueled my comics making, because I wasn't a fan of grunge. And thank God for Britpop, because it made its way to the States. And that also changed my life. And I was able to put that on the comics. So when people say the editor should be invisible, I disagree wholeheartedly, because I hope when you picked up a Shelly Bond book, or at that time Shelly Roberg book, before I became the shortest Bond girl on earth, before I fell in love with my favorite artist, I hope you can look at the books I edited and you can see from the cover my graphic design aesthetic and my sensibility. And that's what I think great editing is. It's a point of view and it's curation. That's what was missing in comics. And I think that's what Vertigo helped usher in addition to creator-driven material.
Basically, Shelly will treat an imprint or a line or, you know, whatever set of books she's working on like a record label. So she's not one to pull from, oh, I want, you know, country music. I want this kind of music. I want reggae. She's like, no, listen, this is a Brit pop label. This is, we are Anglophiles here. This is what we do. Do you know what I mean? Like she also speaks basically in song lyrics, and she's so well versed as a music nerd. And I didn't get it. There's so many things I didn't understand until, you know, I mean, we're going back to 2016. I didn't understand. And there's so much education, like music nerd, comic nerd education behind what Shelly does and Shelly's whole comic book, like, belief system. And I was immersed in it. I was legit thrown in the deep end and was like, what are we doing? I don't understand. Why is his hair like that? Why does he have to wear that? I don't understand. And she's like, listen, you have no style. I'm giving you style.
Wait a second. Whoa, no, I never said that.
No, but that was the education. That was the theme of my Shelly Bond education. Wow. Was like, because Shelly will straight up tell you, like, you know, I've shown her work, even more recent work, and she will very, without malice, just look at me and go, yeah, I like your black and white stuff better. And it's true. Listen. But she has a point. Like, there's no insult in it. It's just literally like, this is what I'm attracted to, this level of line quality. I love that, Shelly. Well, I love you.
Listen, Tess and Leonard, I have to say this about Tess. That's the kind of editor I am. If I want to work with you, we have to have an agreement that, you know, I'm a straight shooter. I don't waste time. And it's the number one important thing I try to tell editors who are coming up, young or otherwise. Don't waste time. Be honest and upfront, and be selective about who you work with, because that is going to matter. You know, we don't have a lot of time on earth. And Tess, you're one of the people that, like, I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished so far and what you have yet to do with your work. And I'm a huge fan of black and white comics. Love and Rockets got me in. I didn't realize that comics were cool. I love the Hernandez brothers, and I love both Gilbert and Jaime, but the line quality, you know, I always say, if it's not there in black and white, it's not ready for color. And sometimes it doesn't need color. And I begged Philip to do Geezer in black and white. Tess is the kind of artist who could be doing black and white as well. Not everybody belongs in that camp. But Tess's color work is also very good. So sometimes I think, Tess, you forget that there was another sentence or two after I made that crass statement to you. But I kid you not, your line work is next level. And working with you on Kid Lobotomy, I got to watch you evolve in the same way that I had the honor to watch Chris Pichello evolve on Shade. But that was a much longer time period. You know, Shade ran from what I think to issue 72. So that was like 8 years. Tess evolved in a matter of months, and she continues to do her best.
That's because you handed me off to Milligan. I didn't have a choice.
Well, I didn't exactly
hand you off or die.
Okay, there's that. But
no, I didn't find this. Sorry, I didn't find the statement crass. I like the way you speak, and
okay, that's what the thing I was going to ask then. Shelly, I mean, you're talking about efficiency. We have got some questions, by the way. Yes, guys, we are going to get your questions in, and I'll do that after this. when it comes to editorial approach and talking to artists and talking to writers and corralling them to get them to do their best work, do you feel that sometimes editors, and maybe even for yourself, that you feel that it can seem like it's a little abrasive or it's a little bit in your face, but it's purely because it's efficiency, it's getting do you know what I mean?
Semantics matter, without a doubt. You have to have a personal connection with someone before anything else. And it really breaks my heart to hear when I speak to other young cartoonists and artists out there, when they say they've never had a chat with their editor, that they've been on email with their editor. I mean, to me, when you hire, it's a phone call. Now, we're lucky big time. It can be as rather in the eye. I prefer that. I prefer meeting in person. And, you know, that's when Tess and I met in person and had coffee and just sort of, you know, duked it out and clicked on so many levels. And I couldn't wait to get my hands on her art because I saw so much promise. She was already doing incredible art. It's not that she needed me, but if she wanted my input, I was 200% right there. And in fact, the only reason she didn't finish my memoir was because we had a pivot, and that was my choice. And, you know, I truly believe that things work out in the end, and I'm really glad that Tess and I had the opportunity to work on Kid Lobotomy, to make that the launch book of Black Crown, which, by the way, no regrets, 10 books in under 3 years, incredibly proud of every book. Some of them were Eisner nominated. Others include artists like Nick Robles and Martin Simmons, who went on to take over the world in comics, right? So super proud. And I think it gave me the extra time to figure out what that memoir really needs to be. So Filth and Grammar, it's the step-by-step guide, handbook to making comics. Fast Times, it's the second part of the trilogy. It's my life in the 90s, the rise and fall and rise of a comic book editor in over her head. I was in my mid-20s. All bets are off.
And
the third
so
part
much, real quick, so much of the art also in this, you know, the second part of the trilogy is from independent artists.
And a lot of women.
Yes.
Let's be honest. That was intentional. And yet, I always hire people based on talent. And yet, those are the people that delivered beautifully. So, yes, we've got some newcomers, some people that you might recognize, Leonard, because you've been a huge supporter of my work. So, some of the people from Insider Art, in fact, this is a good case in point. And I'm going to just finish up my one comment, which is, third part of the trilogy is the graphic memoir. We don't need to talk about it at all, but it pretty much picks up on my life from about 2002 to present day. So it's a lot about dealing with humiliation, and I'll leave it there. But if we go back to Fast Times, an interesting thing that happened on the way to the pandemic, 2020. So a lot of my anthologies are fueled by current events. Femme Magnifique started as a reaction to the 2016 presidential election, a missed opportunity for women.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Vitriol all around. So I called two of my friends, Brian Miller, Christy Miller of Hi-Fi Color. They did a Kickstarter. I said, hey, let's do one together. Let's salute powerful women. We did. Pandemic came around, saw the same vitriol on comics, could not believe major comic book companies were shutting down. I found it unbelievable. I could come up with other adjectives, but that's enough. It angered me, and I thought, wow, this is a really good time to show independent comics people and editors it can still be done, and it can be done fast, and it can be done well. So I came up with Insider Art. The concept behind that was we're all stranded inside a house. There are many different rooms. And basically, I reached out to 7 other comic book editors. Some of them I didn't even know. You know, I went into a Facebook group, and I pretty much just said, hey, anybody interested in working with me. I called my former assistant, Mariah Huner. She was on board. And I basically got 7 people together, and I said, we each get to take a room in the house. I get the garage because I was going to do a garage band. And so it wasn't just my book. There were 7 editors, and here was the brief, because there's always a brief. It was, you get 20 pages. You need to hire female and non-binary creators. Make short comics, single illustration and prose, games, how-to crafts, anything you want that celebrates the art of making things while we're stuck indoors. There must be cats. And the reason why we had cats is because most people are cat people. I'm allergic, so I took one for the team. But we made that in under 3 months and put it on Gumroad. We raised over $7,000 for female and non-binary comic book retailers because no one else was. You had big companies, and I salute the Hero Initiative. They did great work, but no one was looking out for the independents. And so I'm really proud to say that on Gumroad, we raised over $7,000, and then we were able to kickstart specifically to get the creators comps. And so that was really gratifying. I'm bringing that up because that's how you do an anthology. You do it for the right reasons. You do it with the right people. You know, we didn't pay people to contribute to Insider Art because we had no money. And in fact, we had no paper to print on at that point. It was all on Gumroad. However, I took many of the artists who donated their time and their skills, and I hired them to do short stories that will be appearing in Fast Times. So you'll meet a wonderful artist named Pidge, who does a book called Infinite Wheat Paste that I highly recommend. It's my favorite indie comic right now. She was Ignatz nominated, and her work is tremendous. She's basically, to me, a combination of Paul Pope and Brandon Graham, and yet she's wholly original. She is a brilliant storyteller. And you'll see work by Nana Venter, who actually has a story with Leah Moore in Hey Amateur, and Anna Pacholsky. So many artists who came to Insider Art, who I was so proud to hire and actually pay real money to do more comics for Fast Times. So yeah, it's paying it forward. It's looking at people who contributed their time for the greater good and weren't expecting to be paid. So it's a message I want to send to anyone who's making art out there. It's hard if it's your full-time job. It's hard to make a living. And believe me, I know, because I'm an independent creator now. You know, we self-publish through Off-Register Press. My husband and I, it might look like we're swimming in money because you might see us reaching some pretty decent targets on Kickstarter. We are still putting money into our business. It's very difficult, but don't stop. If it means you have to take some time off and take a day job, you know, just to kind of get some savings together, do it. Do what you have to do. I'm going to be selling some really special pieces of artwork and items that I've acquired over the years. Some special Sandman keepsakes that I hate to part with, but I know that they're going to be going into good homes. And I know that the money is going to be used to make more comics. And sort of that's why I'm here. So I mention this because if you're born to make comics, don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anything stop you. Just drink the right tea.
Huzzah. Absolutely.
Shelly and Philip are the cool auntie and uncle in comics who you want to go to their house and like hang out and hear all the stories and learn about their history together, because Shelly and Philip not only love the craft of comics, they love us. They love, you know, the family of independent, passionate kids out here. And it's I wish we heard from Shelly and Philip more. That's why y'all need these books, because it's a little slice of the soul that you're kind of hearing now.
Absolutely. You got Clydine, who's I'm going to get a couple of questions in from our audience, but we've got a comment here from Clydine. I put it up already, but I'm going to put it up again. This is from Clydine Nee, who Shelly may know, Tess
I
may know.
do. There's only one Clydine. She's the best.
Absolutely.
Clydine,
You
Philip
can be
is
the change you want in the world. Just remember to pay it forward to the next generation of creators.
Yes,
absolutely. Which you talked about, and you've talked about paying it forward to the next the generation of creatives. But we also have to look to the readers as well. This is Sir Lister of Smeg who's asking, the comics industry has had a problem getting the younger readers in the past years. How would you go about fixing that? And is it even in the editorial? Is it in an editor's power to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Look, if I told you the number of times I've put together imprint ideas that run through generations, things that are just tossed out the window, it's sad, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop. I think it begins with handing that first book to a kid. One of the comics I recommend that I love to bits, and I actually recommended it to Tess, and she bought it, I think. I was with you, Tess, when you bought it. It's El Defo.
Yes.
It was recommended to me, believe it or not, by my high school best friend who was a third grade teacher. I had not heard of the book. So isn't that, like, talk about coming full circle? My high school best friend was absolutely nothing like me. Except we were both baton twirlers. She was forced to listen to David Bowie and The Clash when I would drive us to school. And she wasn't into that music. So we went our separate ways, but we'll always be friends. And I loved how she was the one to recommend El Defo. So I recommend picking a kid's comic that moves you and starting there. And also the Peanuts, because the only thing I can claim as my earliest introduction to comics were the Peanuts books and the cartoons. Charles Schultz, blew my mind, and I was always drawing the Peanuts as a kid. So yes, the earlier the better, but again, be selective. Pick something that you think might appeal to a particular kid in your life.
I have an answer. Sorry to just jump on that.
You're the guest here. Go for it.
I just want to add something to that. More access to comics is the name of the game for me. I started out, grandma took care of me after school. We'd go to Kmart, go to the grocery store, go to wherever, and there were Archie's digests next to the cash registers. Or the spinner rack of comics, because this was the early 80s, so they were still kind of there in certain spots. That was how I got started, just being knee high to a grasshopper and having it at eye level. Like, I need that. A young artist, a young a passionate creator like I was, that was my answer. That was my ticket out. So I really, really, really wish we had more access for people outside of comic shops and outside of the online arena.
Yeah.
And libraries. Let's face it, libraries are still great places to hang out.
There you go.
So
I was just about to say the thing I did, and this was about 2 years ago. I need to do it again. I bought. I basically put £150 from one. £150 from a weekend of DJing, and I bought a pile of eBay copies of Calvin and Hobbes, and I took them into my local library, and Perfect. They are still there by all accounts, and they're going out. We got. I do want to go into the fast times, and we'll talk about the campaign as well in particular. But we'll do this as well. Clydine saying, I think what's happened in terms of editing, and this is my opinion, editors today are traffic managers are traffic managers just getting pages in and getting pages out, and there is an art to editing.
Yeah,
agreed. 200%. Clydine, you hit it on the head, and it's a shame. And I think that's also because if you look back in the days of Vertigo, when there were monthlies, when Sandman was coming out monthly, and Preacher and Transmetropolitan and Fables, there was a rhythm because there was a deadline. There was a need to hit the targets. So editors not only needed to be charming to get out to get the pages out, to get people to continue working. But you had no choice but to fire people when they didn't hit the deadline, or put a fill-in issue in between issues of a major arc if the main artist was not agreeable to getting an inker to help them. That's something else that I just taught in an editing class. I did a 4-week editing and self-publishing class, which was a total whim. Did it over Zoom. It was a lot of fun, and I had 68 amazing students. But one of the things I was trying to teach them is editing is troubleshooting. And troubleshooting means if I can't get my book done this month, well, I'm not going to get it done next month either. What can I do now to get back on track? 9 times out of 10, it's get your artist or your writer help. Get help. Put someone on roughs so that the penciler can be a little faster when they're doing all the background detail. Get someone on inking assist. I mean, that's how we put out so many issues of Lucifer and all of the other wonderful series that we did, iZombie. Sometimes we brought people in to help. And honestly, it had to be done. So I say to people, if you really want to be a comic book editor who matters, you have to be good cop and bad cop. You cannot be afraid to hire and fire. And I recall back in the day, there was a male editor who said that the best editors hire the right people. And that always irritated me, because while it's true, you go into it, thinking good thoughts, but often you're let down. So you hire the right people, you help them as much as possible, but if they're not the right people, you fire them and move on. And that's what I think a lot of people are afraid to do. And a lot of times when you're working for a big company, you sometimes aren't allowed to fire the big shot in the room. And so again, that's why I think independent comics work best for me, because I know what I like and I like what I know. And the people that I want to work with, I really, really respect. And so hopefully they respect me too. And so it's a give and take. There's usually there's a happy compromise as well. So you can't go into it like being a bully. You have to go into it knowing that editing is just as collaborative as the comic book process. It's passing the baton, but the editor holds the baton every single stage. And the editor has a very intimate relationship with everyone on the team, from the writer to the penciler to the letterer to the colorist and the inker to the cover artist to the assistant. Frankly, delegating, knowing what you can trust your assistant with is critical. And I'm still of the school of, I like to hire people who are brand new because I want them to understand the way I work, because it's worked for me for over 30 years. And that's hard. There are a lot of very seasoned editors who I think are very talented. Some of them have hit me up, and asked me if I would hire them. And I don't have the money to pay an assistant right now. But also, a lot of times when you're at my stage of editing, I'm looking to develop more of what I've done. So I'd be more likely to hire someone new and train them the way that I do things, rather than have to show someone how to unlearn some things that don't work for me, but that maybe worked for another editor. Because again, no disrespect, but I have a very particular method to my madness, and it's a bit chaotic, like Tess intimated, and she knows firsthand. It's messy. That's why the title of the book is Filth and Grammar. I get a lot of red ink on my hands at every stage. Yeah. It's not done until it's on press. And I would sometimes say that to my bosses over the years, because I would fix things until the very end. And that's why freelancers liked me. And I would never lie, because God forbid there was a mistake in Sandman. You bet I would call Neil Gaiman and tell him before he saw it in print. You have to be fearless. You cannot be afraid to mess up, fess up, and then correct it as soon as you can in the next edition. That's why I think people respected me. Not only because I think people understood that I loved reading comics and making comics, but because I wasn't afraid to mess up. And you're going to mess up because the percentage of error when you're juggling 5 to 6 monthly comics is gigantic, even if you think you're pretty good at what you do.
In that regard, then, talking as showing as much control as you can, to get the best work out of not only the people you're working with, but also yourself. Then that relates then to Kickstarter and bringing Kickstarter into the equation, because you've got this the ability to directly create a relationship with an audience. So you're not just managing the book itself, you're also managing the audience and the audience expectations.
Yes.
Is that the appeal? Was that the appeal then of doing Filth and Grammar and your other projects and Fast Time on Kickstarter?
Absolutely.
Real quick, I just have to excuse myself real fast. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Go for it.
Your audience is everything. Look, I grew up in a family business, not a glamorous one, unless you think dry cleaning is glamorous. And Leonard, you might be the kind of person who does. So if that's so, I can assure you it's not. However, by having to press pants and sort through dirty hotel laundry, while my sister got to wear a dress and be the receptionist, I learned the hard way that, you know, it's important to chip in and do the dirty work and the ugly work if you want to succeed. I like to think of my audience as really being my rock and the only reason that I can actually comfortably make comics today. And I'm grateful. And I do my best to deliver on my promises. And in these pandemic times, it's not easy. And I'm sure you know, Leonard, there have been paper shortages, there have been supply chain delays. My printer is based in Korea, and sadly, the staff came down with a terrible batch of COVID. So there were an additional, I think, 6 weeks delayed on Filth and Grammar just because of that. You know, it already takes 12 weeks when you're working with a printer overseas because the books come by boat, you know, just like in the 19th century. So there were a lot of variables. However, I find that honesty is still the best policy. And so I always assure my backers that if there's trouble up ahead, I will let them know. And I'm always, you know, doing my best to keep them in the loop. And that means a lot of updates with both art and a song and dance, because I do think that it is fun. It's like keeping a live journal or a blog with people who actually are into the same things you're into. So I feel really, really lucky that I've amassed just a really dedicated group of readers who are into the comics that not only I make, but that Philip makes. So I'll give them a cheers, because they're the reason why I can sit here and talk to you, Leonard, because otherwise I'd be at a day job on Sunday, which, by the way, self-publishing is comics 24/7, but you don't mind because you're making the comics you want to read and share with the world. Pressing pants at a dry cleaning plant, not the same thing.
Not really. We've got this great panel from Tess on the screen right now from the Kickstarter page. Tess, if you really want to kind of quickly talk about this, because I think this is an amazing panel. Yeah, go ahead. Just knock yourself out. Go and talk about this, please, because this is awesome.
This is actually not the entire piece. This is from a moment where Shelly was describing this exact moment did not happen in her life, but this is the spirit of the moment, her walking in as a young, passionate fan and meeting who would one day become legends. On the right is my favorite portrait. That's Peter Milligan, who I got thrown to, not really understanding what I was getting into. You know, it was literally like, as Shelly described, the pivot towards working on a book called Kid Lobotomy. I was like, the shade guy? Really? Me? And she was like, no, listen, I'm gonna take, you know, a legend and I'm gonna put him with a newbie. Like this is gonna work. Just trust me. And I was like, okay, great. And changed my life, changed everything. So that is why I love this piece, because this is him in his heyday. You know, there's videos of him online doing interviews where he was so cool with the the Ray-Bans and he was just awesome. So like that's the ultimate. But yeah, this illustration is probably my favorite in many, many years because those are the greats, man. So cool.
There are some definite sexy bitches on that screen right there.
That's basically. Oh, go ahead, Butter.
No, go ahead. Go.
You.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, we'll go quickly through the campaign because, like I say, if we go straight to the top of it and just have a look, this is admittedly in Brit. So let's go to America. We're talking 25,000 goal, 37,853 at the moment with 17 days to go, which is a hell of an achievement, Shelly.
Thank you.
What would that then allow you to do with the next chapter? In terms of the support and that kind of the backing that you've been given by Kickstarter?
Well, basically, when your first target goal means you can make the book, and when I make a book, I like to make a book that's going to be durable, that's going to stand the test of time. So I go into these projects knowing that there's going to be a hardcover, which looks kind of like this. And it has a ribbon in it like this because, you need something to keep your place. It has a spot gloss on the front and the back.
Mm-hmm.
And it has Smythe sewn binding, which means it will sit flat and it will not eat the dialogue that sometimes strays into the spine. Yes. So the books that I make, that's the hardcover. And the soft cover that I make has French flaps. So again, if you want to keep your place and savor the book in bits, you don't have to fold down the corners, or you don't have to scramble for like a piece of paper to hold your place. So I like to think I make beautiful books because I print in Korea and they have amazing production values there. And I like to think that you're going to get your money's worth. And I like to price the books reasonably because right now postage is an abomination. It is so costly to mail things.
Is that, from what I've been hearing, that's the biggest killer when it comes to campaigns and getting any kind of...
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, Philip's most recent campaign for a book called Geezer, about a Britpop band that never made it, we did something really smart with that book. It's a 7-inch comic book single, black and white. And the writer, who is one of my editors, who's the editor of Fast Times, Will Potter, he's based in England. So we were able to split the print run, and we've got a UK version and an American version.
Nice.
And Philip has been doing the fulfillment on the US version. Will's doing the fulfillment on the UK version. And there have been backers who bought both, which is terrific. There are some subtle differences. We do have a glossary. I'm the editor of Geezer. We've got a glossary for people who aren't quite Anglophiles. But yes, to answer your question succinctly, the price of shipping is deadly right now. And I did mention that in the campaign. And so that's why we offer a digital edition too. People that join the campaign now, I'm really excited about them because I'm doing something different with my stretch goals this time. Usually I do stickers or I do notebooks. They tend to be a bit more costly than I would like. So I decided to start this campaign with video team reunion stretch goals. So at every $5,000 increment, we unlock the chance to have a 1-hour team reunion. I moderate, but I'm going to get the questions from the backers beforehand. So I'm going to be recording all of these reunions. We've got Lucifer so far with Peter Gross, Mike Carey, Ryan Kelly, and a few other surprise guests. And then we also have Paul Pope of Heavy Liquid and 100% fame, and many other things. Battling Boy. He did a Batman 100 that cleaned up at the Eisners. So those stretch goals are cool because I promised those 1-hour recordings by Christmas. So you can have a Vertigo Christmas binge watch. So the next one up is Sandman Mystery Theater. And we're like, I think $2,000 away from Matt Wagner, of Grendel fame, by the way. So if you're watching Netflix, he's going to have his Grendel show is going to drop soon. But Matt, of course, is famous for Mage, and he did Sandman Mystery Theater with Stephen T. Siegel, who will also be there. And some of the artists who drew arcs on Sandman Mystery Theater will be a part of that one. I wanted to reveal something big here, Leonard and Tess, so I'm going to actually say it.
Go for it.
But Neil Gaiman has committed to doing a Sandman reunion. It's a pretty steep level, so if anyone's interested in spending an hour with Neil and some of the seminal artists, including Jill Thompson, because I love her and I have to say she's part of it, there will be other guests. It will happen, but we have to keep unlocking these levels. So
People,
if you're watching
give
Sandman,
the Kickstarter money.
right?
I need this.
If you're watching Sandman on Netflix right now, by the way, it's great. I've watched 3 episodes. I'm not going to lie. I watched 1 and 2, and then I skipped to John D because I'm a huge David Thewlis fan, and I had to see 24 Hours or 24/7 as it's called. Oh my God, that's all I'm going to say. Please watch it, but please know that there are other fantastic superstars that you saw on Tess's illustration that Leonard had up a few moments ago. I'm not going to name names, but another person from that group agreed to do a 1-hour deep dive team reunion.
What? Oh, I'm calling you after this interview.
I'm saying nothing. Not even you can charm it out of me.
Damn it.
So it's one of that bunch. There you go. Listen, I mean, I'm excited for you, and I'm excited about those stretched goals. I mean, Neil Gaiman, I don't particularly care about much anymore, because I invited him on to do my Miracle Man panel at San Diego, and he turned me down, so he can go jump. So you know,
sorry.
I'm selfish, and I wanted it, but there we go. That's the way it is. I mean, we've got Chuck who's saying, wow, absolutely, very much so. It's very much a wow from Chuck there. And indeed, just waiting for payday. So, no, I'd totally buy you on that one. Into the Blue Mister asking, wasn't Matt Wagner's Mage an early Comico character?
Kamiko, yes.
Kamiko, sorry.
And by the way, Leonard, you will learn how to pronounce Kamiko when you read Fast Times. I have there is one page where it's a shot of me answering the telephone at Kamiko, because that was my job. I was hired as an editorial assistant. We stuffed envelopes. We sent rejection letters to people like Mike Allred, and we answered the phone. And people used to crank call me all the time and say, Kamiko, ha, ha, ha. And I'd say, Kamiko, Kamiko. But yes, Mage, I would say that was Matt's first big creator-owned book, and a terrific one. But Grendel is where he stole my heart. Grendel 16 and 17 were the 2 books that got me into comics, along with Love and Rockets, I have to say. Matt is a visionary.
Really?
Matt is such a visionary, and I learned more from asking him questions. He was so kind to me. And it's interesting because he was living in Philadelphia a few years before me. He went to art school there. And so when I got to Kamiko, I would sweat when I would answer the phone and he'd say, hi, it's Matt. I mean, I would like literally, it would be pouring down my face. My knees would knock. He was my first crush in comics. I thought he was the coolest. And Leonard's gonna really be impressed with this. Not only was he a phenomenal writer, I mean, he was erudite. He was into like cool things. He was into graphic design. He was a terrific draftsman. He loved the Jam and the Clash. I mean, I was done right there and then. Meanwhile, he was married to my boss's sister. So I knew it wasn't going to happen, but he was the best. He was so nice to me. He didn't treat me like a kid. And so if I had a question about storytelling or about the character, he would always really be nice to me. And I will never forget that. We've remained friends over the years, and he teases me about the crush. Nothing went on. I just wanted to be clear. And it was me. I was 21 years old, he was, I think, 28 at the time, so he was really old, you know, and he was married. But first art crush, without a doubt, Matt Wagner. Still a favorite guy.
These are the stories that I get little snippets of, and I'm like, wait, tell me more. What else happened? I love this dynamic. I want book 3 of this trilogy to be all the truth. This will be the full true Hollywood story, man.
Well,
I eat this up. I love when you talk about the old days.
Tess, you will be very disappointed because in the campaign, there's a question that says, is this fact or fiction? And my answer is yes. Because truth be told, I was the ultimate goody-goody. At conventions, Tess, you drew the story. People liked me because I had the credit card. Come on. Nobody cared that I was a Mike Lee fan, that I watched Life is Sweet and Naked. Nobody cared that I liked Bauhaus and Paul Weller. I had the credit card. I could buy everybody drinks. Come on. I did not have such a glamorous life. However, I did charm Philip Bond into marrying me, and all it took was a bag of Oreo double stuff. So there's that story. But honestly, I pretended to rave all day and night when I was making comics. I was mostly proofreading, yelling at people to get out from under their desks, to keep drawing and to stop hiding. I was chasing lost FedEx packages because, of course, we dealt with the mail back in the 90s. We didn't really have anything digital, barely. Even lettering was done on the board. So, yeah, it was a lot about
herding cats.
Yes. There you go. But it was glamorous because I made it so. I would crank up Suede. Come on. You better believe if I was working at my office at 10 o'clock, ballooning pages, I was doing it to Suede's coming up. Come on. Like, of course, I made it glamorous for me. And that was my life in comics. And that's still my life in comics.
Yep.
That's cool. That's cool. Right. I mean, this has been a slice. I've been loving this. This is just amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing Fast Times. Well, I mean, number one, I mean, I'm really looking forward to Giza coming through the door. I mean, I've got a Will on the messaging saying Giza is packed in the post on Monday. Thank you. Yeah, down for that. But certainly, definitely, I mean, looking forward to Fast Times because if I actually share it again, I am. It says there on the top. I'm a backer. I've pledged for it. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to the third part as well. Do you have a title for that yet? By the way, have you said that yet?
You know, I'm a true title person, and you know, I'm going to quote Elizabeth Wurtzel, who wrote Prozac Nation, which, by the way, I didn't read it in the 90s because I was reading comics, but I've read it in recent years. And one of her quotes is, I only believe in love at first sight. I know it when I see it. That's how I feel about a title. And so I'm reluctant to say it. I want to keep it under wraps because I don't want to get it confused with Filth and Grammar or Fast Times, which both start with F.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well, I mean, like I say, we've got the like Fast Times, and that's on its way. 17 days to go when it comes to this particular campaign, and it can be found at kickstarter.com/projects/sxbond/fast-times. Yeah, by all means, everybody, please jump in on this because you will not be disappointed if you've seen Shelly's other books that have gone out, like I say, Filth and Grammar. That's like I say, the copy I've got here. This is this is where Tess now holds her copy up. But I don't want to put that pressure on.
In the library, which is inaccessible at the moment.
So this copy was achieved on Kickstarter. This is out. You can now buy this now.
Wait, no.
Yes, I'm holding up
it in the office.
I'm holding up the illustration that Tess did of me in my office, just to say that I was only able to put one illustration, beautiful illustration, probably my favorite that Tess has ever created. That's in the editorial in Filth and Grammar. But so much of Tess's work will be found in Fast Times. And she is the most important artist to me in Fast Times. Running in tandem with Imogen Mangle, of course, who also did a great deal of work in Filth and Grammar. And I wanted to give her a shout out too for Fast Times, because she is the reason that Filth and Grammar had a sequential component. So I think having Tess and Imogen share space in the same book is tremendous. Imogen, by the way, is 23, right out of art school, and she's going to take over the world one day.
She's a baby. She's just a baby, and she's so talented.
You heard it here first. Leonard, thank you so much for having both Tess and I on. It's fun to chat with Tess. I mean, I really do need to hire her to take her performance on the road, because nobody captures the heart and soul of what I'm trying to do in comics better than Tess. I mean, she's lived it, but she is the true comics champion.
You're not funny. You're not getting any disagreements from me.
So everybody has to back. We're backing this project. We're gonna unlock those extra goodies, and we're gonna get those interviews. Let's go go go. Go to that Kickstarter page.
Absolutely. 17 days to go. Kickstarter.com/projects/sxbond/fast-times. Excellent stuff. Thank you so much indeed for the pair of you for coming on. It's been an absolute blast talking to you. I missed the pair of you, and I can't wait to see you at IRL somewhere down the line.
Yes.
Where can people find out more about yourselves? Shelly, I mean, are you living on Kickstarter at the moment? Are you doing is that where you are? Or where can people find you?
Pretty much. On Twitter, I'm at SXBond. I've got a Facebook page. Also on Instagram, I'm at SXBond Imprimatur. And if anyone still wants a copy of Filth and Grammar, we have a limited supply at offregister.press, which is our website. My husband Philip and I call it a comics and design lab. So we've got a handful of copies. If you're interested, you can order it right from us there, or the digital copy, which we always have.
Cool. And for yourself, Tess, I mean, considering that I am, like I say, you've been working on an autobiographical piece for some time now, I'm really looking forward to seeing getting closer and closer to fruition. Looking forward to that coming. Where can people best find you? Because you have lived rather well on Twitter, but it's now a case of where you are most at home. So where do people find you?
Twitter has been my home for many, many years. That's the quickest, easiest way to figure out what I'm doing, what's happening, the conversations that are going on. And that's just my name, TESSFOWLER on Twitter. And then if you go over to Instagram, it's the same, TESSFOWLER with the number 7. You can find me there, and I post constantly. I'm currently doing a whole lot of black and white work because of Shelly, because Shelly said, I love it. It's great.
And in fact, and you owe me a piece, by the way. I actually commissioned you last week to do a piece.
Yep. I'm working right now as we speak on black and white. So
yay. Can't wait.
This is where I kind of have to keep myself a little bit quiet, because I asked Tess if she would be up for doing a Miracle Man piece for the intro of my panel, and like an idiot, I didn't send a reference and I didn't get it. So, no regrets. Not at all.
I'm still here. I'm here for next year. It'll be good.
Fair enough. Aaron Neighbors is saying, just backed. I'm hoping that everybody who's watching this dives in on Kickstarter and do support that campaign. Tess, Shelly, thank you so much indeed for coming on, and all the very best for the final 17 days of the campaign.
Yay!
Thank you so much, Leonard, Tess. Viva Comics, everybody.
Brilliant stuff. For myself, thank you very much indeed for watching this race special. It's an incidental episode. It's the ones that we do outside of the main run of the show. We are back with episode 1 of season 10 of Talking Con, A Cup of Tea with an Englishman in San Diego next week, as we are going to do a couple of episodes back to back where we are talking with the stars of SDCC, basically the ones that I felt really did stick the landing at Comic-Con a couple of weeks ago. We've got 2 great guests for our first one. We'll share more information about that in the next couple of days, but do follow me on Englishman SDCC for all of that. From myself, from Tess, and from Shelly, thank you so much indeed for watching this. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And from me, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.